If you want to compete in either IDPA or USPSA and don't want to spend several $1,000s, I have a solution for you. In this video, I compete and build a budget-friendly carry optic setup with a Glock 45. Welcome back. If you'd watched any of my previous videos, I briefly touched on that I was looking for a Glock to start into this. And the reason for that is I didn't want to invest several $1,000s to determine if I liked this sport. Now, as you know my story, I ended up going with the Walther Q5 steel frame, and the rest is history. I figure there are a fair amount of people out there coming into the gun community that want to experiment with this, but maybe necessarily don't want to dive in full speed or make the larger investment of what some of us end up doing. And what's really cool about this amazing sport is you can essentially compete with what you carry. That said, I wanted to keep the parameters fairly strict and create this video for the individual who's essentially the dabbler or even the gun guy / gal that may be on a budget but possibly discouraged because they may feel that their stock non-competition gun is not competitive. What I ended up establishing is a $1,000 budget with the parameters set that it can compete both in USPSA and IDPA. So you can actually go to both sports and be competitive with the setup that I'm sharing. And so some of you may be thinking, well, what if I don't want to run an optic on my gun? You can subtract the optic and you'll know where you set budget-wise because you can certainly compete with irons. But I chose carry optic because there's an increasing popularity in the gun market of having red dot sights on the gun. Additionally, this division particularly has a light requirement for ammo being in minor power factor. Essentially, you can just go to your store and grab 9mm off the shelf and compete with it. So the barrier to entry with this setup is very low. Let's start with the gun I chose. I ended up choosing the Glock 45 because I wanted to discover any deficiencies I might have in my training, because a very well-tuned and heavier gun can really hide a lot of deficiencies, and a lighter gun that you have to work harder to shoot at can uncover quite a bit. Now, the one caveat I will kind of mention here is that you'll see some footage where I have an SRO on it. I ended up using this as my training tool before I decided to make this a budget build. And diving into the gun specifically, if you're not familiar with the Glock 45, this is actually an MOS model, meaning it is optic ready. And so particularly with the Glock 45, it's a combination of a 19 and essentially a 17, where you have a Glock 19 slide and a 17 frame. And so why I ended up choosing the Glock 45 was for several reasons. And largely because, number one, it fits well in my hands and has a similar footprint to my CZ. And as funny as that sounds, a lot of people complain about the Glock grip angle. I don't find that something necessarily that actually sets me back because I naturally like to have a high grip on the gun. Secondly, the availability of these guns on the used market is plentiful. In fact, I ended up spending, with the optic plates and the entire gun, I ended up spending $515 all said and done after I bought it used. And when I actually picked it up, it was lightly used as it looked almost all brand new internally. And now there are plenty of options such as the Glock 34 or even the 17, which have longer barrels, but why I chose the 45 is I actually like a smaller footprint personally for carry optics because of the less real estate I have on the front of the gun will give me more weight back in my hands. And what that actually means in terms of performance is that the return to zero is much quicker and I can transition the gun just a tad faster. The funny thing about this is I ended up putting a medium back strap on here, and it actually extends the beaver tail. And why that's important to me is because on Glock 17s and Glock 34s, I end up getting a little bit of Glock bite per se. Doesn't really bother me, but I also don't like looking at down my hands and randomly having blood. And with all the elements of lead, yada yada yada, I actually want to keep all my brain cells and my blood levels correct. That said, that's just why I chose the Glock 45. It fits right up in my hands and I can still, with the medium back strap, get right up into the grip tang nice and high. and the presentation for me is natural. I ended up buying this gun pre-loved on Gun Broker, and it was in incredible condition. I'd argue whoever had it prior maybe only shot a few hundred rounds through it, because when I opened up the case, the gun just looked brand new, and there were 3 mags. It had all the back straps, and what was a bonus, and I didn't see in the original description, is it came with all the optic plates. Now, for all you Glock enthusiasts that say they come with them or don't come with them, I'm not sure, but I did find it awesome that they came with them, and I know if you were to go on Glock and purchase them separately, they come out to about 50 bucks. In my mind, I feel like I saved an extra 50 bucks. Now for this video, I wanted to essentially keep it as what I call pure. And what I mean is I'm not actually doing any internal modifications to the gun, and I'm actually running it stock. And I want to prove to the point that you can be competitive with a factory gun without throwing money at internal parts like triggers. And so I ended up keeping the stock trigger configuration in it. And so to kind of keep it within my target budget of $1,000, I ended up buying this Holosun 507C optic. I actually really like this optic a lot because for the money you pay for it, you get a ton of value. It actually has the actual solar setting so it actually can continue to charge. It has different reticle options, and it's got a fairly decent sized window that definitely does the job. And I picked this up used from a friend for $250. And another positive of it is that the Holosuns have the same footprint as the Trijicon SRO RMR. So if you decide you want to go that route, it's a simple bolt-on and replacement for this. So let's talk about the other items I had to grab to make this a full complete kit. What was nice about this is it came with 3 mags, but I did want to get a 4th mag, and that's only $25 from Glock if you get a factory magazine, which I highly recommend. And to make this competitive in USPSA, I ended up buying these Henning base pads and spring that give it a capacity up to 23. And that's what you basically need for USPSA. Now, if you want to run it in IDPA, you just simply remove the spring and the base pad and run the factory, because for Carry Optic, the most rounds you'll ever end up needing is 11. That's usually your division capacity, your first mag, but everything after that is 10. So you can just swap base pads out and you can try the different sports as you need. And I ended up picking those 3 base pads up and the springs for $129. Now there are less expensive options out there. I'll try to list a few on my website, but Henning are ones that I prefer because of the quality and the consistency of the product. The next item you'll end up using is a mag pouch. I used a simple $25 Amazon one like this one right here, and this one does the job. The one caveat I will say is because they are fairly close together, what you'll want to do is loosen probably the front side of it if you have that option and end up getting this one. And the reason for that is because in IDPA, if you drop a loaded mag, that ends up being a penalty. So this is why you want to loosen the front and tighten up the rear just a little bit more, so when you do that quick grab and insert the mag, you won't end up grabbing 2 mags. And over the years, I've found that this is the sufficient number of minimum amount of mags you will need for both sports. And some of you are saying, well, what about the 3rd mag to go load it? Put that in your pocket, guys. When you go to make ready, you can actually just pull out of your pocket because you're going to do it anyways, and you just rack it and go. But for the purpose of playing our sport, you'll have it right here on the side for what you need. Now the next item you'll need is a holster. I ended up buying this used for $30. It's actually made for a Glock 22 Gen 5, so actually a fairly large gun. And believe it or not, a lot of the Glocks carry about the same footprint, and I kind of know that. And so it ends up just fitting in there just nicely, and it does the job. And the reason why I like Comptax is because they're simple, they're easy. And I'll put links in the blog to kind of give you more direction on what you can grab. But if you want to get the correct size one and buy a brand new one, they start about $75, and you would want to get the one for the Glock 19, assuming you're getting the Glock 45. And so when you calculate all these items, and as long as you have a good belt and you have ear and eye protection, I ended up spending only $974 out the door. And this right here is what will get me into the range and into a competition. And so with that, I want to take a little bit closer look at specifically the Glock 45. But before I do that, if you like this video, just give it a quick like, as that really helps me out. And you're going to want to subscribe because I'm doing several other reviews on Glock platform-based guns. One of them being not only this, but the DC Precision DC9R and the Zevo Z9 Hypercomp. 3 different extreme guns, all competitive guns that you can go and compete with. But it'll be interesting when we do the actual shootout between all 3 and see where they actually land. So you'll want to subscribe in order to see that video coming out pretty soon. Now, let's talk about the actual first impression of the Glock 45. I like to recommend striker-fired guns in general for newbies. They're just such less drama in every way. You don't have to worry about hitting a safety. You can just go right to work shooting. And the other caveat is the maintenance on these things are so easy. I've seen guys go thousands upon thousands of rounds without even cleaning the gun, and they just keep going. For out of the box, this gun was substantially nicer than I expected. Keep in mind, a lot of my bar was set by the Walthers, the 2011s, etc. And so for the price, I was thinking I was getting less, but this gun was substantially nicer than I thought it would be, especially the Gen 5 platform, as I found that the trigger was actually nice and crisp. It's nice and crisp in comparison to other generations, and when you kind of break down what the trigger feels like, you'll have that pre-travel there, and it's not bad at all. So you get to a wall, and just a touch of creep, and bang. Where you want to maximize the Glock platform and where it shines is actually in the reset, believe it or not. So when I bring it out and just push it out just a bit, that's the reset, and I'm literally right on the wall. There's not even creep. It literally just puts me right there, and I can go right to work. Why that's critical is when you're doing either doubles or a controlled pair of any sort, your follow-up shots will be much more immediate and accurate because you won't have to go through the process of actually going all the way out and in. And the reset for this is incredibly forceful too. As you get some time dry firing it and getting used to it, you'll find that you can get to that wall consistently and the results will show. Now, a lot of people quarrel about the next point I'm about to talk to, but it's better that you understand the intent before you make an assessment, and that is the Glock grip angle that it's notoriously known for. Some people don't like it. I actually like it a lot. It forces me to get my hand high up into the grip tang here, and it gives me an optimal amount of room for me to get my support hand in there, and I can get a fairly good locked grip on this gun. This is arguably one of the guns that I have the most solid grip on naturally. And part of the design too is that this is a fairly low bore axis gun, and so what that means in short is you'll have just in general less muzzle flip, and with a good grip you'll actually be able to maximize the performance and accuracy of this gun, and that's actually a huge highlight of particularly what the Glock platform is known for. If you don't grip it right, being a lighter gun, it will remind you that very quickly. I was reminded of that when I actually did the strong hand and weak hand only exercises, as I had to say, oh yeah, I need to get my hand higher up on there and get a solid grip on it, because the gun will jump around quite a bit if you're not gripping it correctly. One thing I got a reminder of is heavier guns with finely tuned triggers can mask a lot of what your deficiencies are. And I like how this gun keeps me honest and actually improves me to become a better shooter. And the thing is, all the lessons you learn here, when you go back to either your A setup, you'll find that going to the limits is a lot easier because you found a lot of those deficiencies in this platform. And when you translate it into a more optimized platform, it translates into better performance overall. Now that that's kind of just a quick overview of just the Glock 45 itself, let's actually dive into the shooting drills I had set up for it. The one thing I will say on this is because I bought this gun as an intent to being a training tool for me, I ended up only just putting a few rounds through it and sighting in just to make sure it worked. And I went to my local IDPA match before I did these shooting drills. And I'll talk more about that IDPA match here shortly, but I really didn't have time to warm up it for the match, and now I had some time at a match to go and shoot these drills. Now, at long distance, this gun reminded me very quickly that I need to have a fairly aggressive grip on the gun. And as I started to put more rounds through the gun, it started to reward me with tighter and tighter groups, because at 25 yards, eventually I was able to pull about 30-35 blitz when I was doing doubles at that range. But I can't say enough about the accuracy of this gun. When I was just slow firing it, I was literally doing about a 1-inch group at 25 yards. I couldn't believe, even with a shorter barrel and setup, how accurate and precise this gun was. And that's out of the box, factory untouched. Now, I briefly mentioned earlier that getting a good grip, both strong hand and weak hand, is critical to actually doing well with this platform, and that really shines when you do it either strong hand only or weak hand only. As I started to find that optimal grip for both my strong hand and weak hand, I found that at 12 yards I was able to do 30 splits with just my strong hand, and I was about 40 splits with my weak hand. And I'm confident that I can improve that over time as I put more time into it. When I actually did double specific drills, I set the target up at 12 yards. One of the positives about the gun being light is it gives you a lot of feedback. If it doesn't give you feedback in the dot when you're tracking it, it really gives it in the hands, because you can tell when the grip is just not optimal and you can make those adjustments. As I clamped down and got more serious with this gun, I was able to pull about 4 to 6 inch groups with 20 splits at 12 yards. And that for me is pretty solid and acceptable for either IDPA or USPSA. The next drill is the transitions drill, where I'm going target to target, and this is where this gun for me particularly shined. Between the lightweight and the lack of real estate on the front of the gun, I was able to transition quickly from target to target without any drama at all in my accuracy or even in the precision where these rounds were landing. The one thing it helped me understand more is how inconsistent my grip is when I go from left to right, and that's important because a heavy gun can mask those deficiencies and be very forgiving, but on this gun, if you in any way compromise your grip, you will suffer that in a little bit of accuracy. Now, it having the feedback it does helped me understand that I had to work a consistent and solid grip from left to right or right to left. Now, although I'm confident I probably can't split this gun as fast as I can as my Shadow 2, I would argue that I make that up in the time of transition. So while maybe my splits are 20, whereas they'd probably be 15s or 16 with the Shadow 2, I end up making that for what may be a transition of maybe 50 to down to 35, because I can get on target that much quicker. And when you start to add it up, and between all the targets we shoot on a stage, you'll find that a lot of good shooters make up time in transitions, and that's where this gun shines. Now, staying on the topic of splits and transitions, the one thing is, as you get better, and what other shooters have learned too, is that the faster the splits are, the higher the risk. Better than a gun that shoots 11 or 12 splits, yet compromises in points for accuracy. I can't talk about the shooting experience and be a competitive shooter without shooting a match. And I ended up taking this gun through 3 matches, and the first one was a local IDPA indoor match. And the fun thing was, literally this is what I was talking about earlier, where I literally shot a few rounds and zeroed the gun and when shot the match. And anytime I end up hopping on a new platform or a new gun, I'm typically a little cautious. Now, what that forces me to do is to shoot more fundamentally and focus on the game mechanics such as movement and stage planning, and what that ended up resulting in for me was actually an overall win for the night. Now, I don't want to stop there and make that the measurement of success, because that just happened to be a good night for me. I wanted to actually put this in USPSA and see how I did. And so I ended up going to an outdoor match just literally a week later with my USPSA setup, and it ended up being a fairly challenging match and day for me personally, because one thing I had to learn is you can't only zero a gun at 10 yards. And yes, I know some of you are going to tear me apart in the comments for that, but it showed when I had to hit these hard mini poppers at over 25 yards or these 4-inch poppers at even 15 yards. As I shot the match, what it told me very quickly is I was pulling the gun off targets too quickly, because I'm so used to a heavy gun that I can just yank the gun and pull it around and I'll still get my acceptable shots. What this taught me and gave me the feedback to go think about was I really have to think about how I transition smoothly and also be patient just a tad longer when I'm going from target to target. And that would end up being a better set of accuracy points for me. And so for the results of this match, I ended up not placing well, but I took a lot of information out of that. I had the SRO on for those matches, and I wanted to keep it pure, so I did have to do a match with the hollow set. And I ended up making up what I lost in position at the previous USPSA match at this match, which was an indoor match. And I ended up spending a little bit more time too practicing with the gun and working on those material things that I wanted to get better at. And it showed up in the results for me at this match, as I found out that I could push this gun as hard as I wanted to, and the shots were showing up where I wanted to. And the fun thing was, even on targets that are 15 yards away, I'd say I was probably splitting about 35 splits. You know, the groups were about 3 inches. Now, the one other highlight I want to talk about, particularly with this match, is there was a lot of shooting on the move. And a lighter gun not only transitions a lot easier, but I find that shooting on the move is easier. And you would think that would be easier with the heavy gun because you can stabilize it just a tad easier. But I found that acquiring sights was not necessarily a challenge for me. And shooting on the move, I was surprised when I saw the hits where they were. And it just goes to show you that when you commit to a platform and work on your fundamentals, you can actually maximize the intended design of a gun at its optimal performance level. Now, the only funny, awkward thing I had going on for me is I really hadn't dry fired this optic that much, nor practiced with it. And so my first stage in, I had an indexing problem. Dot! But as soon as I found my dot, I was on my way to shooting the stage and having a great night overall. So there you have it, guys and gals, a carry optic ready setup for both USPSA and IDPA. Now, I mentioned my Shadow 2 quite a bit in this video, and I have in other videos. And something I noticed in the comments prior is that you guys want me to compare a Shadow 2 to whatever platform. So if you are interested in my Shadow 2 going against this budget built gun, in order to see who's the winner pound for pound, if I get 500 likes, I'll make that happen for you guys. Now, throughout this video, I mentioned quite a bit of parts and items that you'll need to probably get in order for this to happen. I'll leave all that stuff on my website and a link below directly to my website where I have all that information, so you can take a look at it and get all the things you may need. And that's it, folks. That's all I have for you today. So until then, we will see you at the range.